So, you've been learning a language for a while now, and you finally have a chance to visit a country where that language is spoken. What do? How can you approach your trip to ensure that you can use that time in country to learn as much as you can, all while having an amazing time? Hi, I'm Luca Lampariello. I'm a language coach who speaks 14 languages, and on this channel, I help people learn foreign languages faster, more efficiently, and in a fun way. In this video, I'll show you how I squeeze every ounce of language learning juice out of my travels so that you can do the same. Let's dive right in, shall we? Before I share my 5 tips for maximizing your language learning while traveling, let me preface my advice by saying this. If you want to use your travels to expand your language skills in a serious way, I recommend attaining at least an A2 or high beginner level in that language first. Though it is possible to apply the tips I'm about to share to a brand new language, it's not something I would advise. In fact, the lower your skill level, the more difficult it is to learn the language while also using it to navigate your day-to-day life at the same time. So try to learn as much as you can before going to the country. You will not regret it. Tip number 1, cultivate your curiosity. Perhaps the most important strategy for learning a language while abroad is simply to be as curious as you possibly can. You're about to be in a place where the written and spoken language you're learning is everywhere on signs and buildings, in books, newspapers, and magazines, and a whole lot more. Heck, when you're around native speakers, the literal air will be thick with your target language. Because of that, it's quite literally in your best interest to act like a sponge and try to absorb as much of that natural, authentic language as you can. So make it a habit to read nearly every bit of text you see. Road signs, restaurant menus, brochures, books, and so on. Take particular advantage of bilingual resources for tourists, which typically come in English or another language commonly spoken by tourists, and the local language. Similarly, build a habit of constantly listening, even to people who are not speaking directly to you. If you're in a well-populated area like a city, you're likely surrounded by dozens of people speaking the local language at any one time. If they're speaking audibly enough that you can hear them, listen. See what you can understand, even if you can only hear a few words here and there. Remember to use common sense with this one. You do not want to listen so conspicuously that people can accuse you of eavesdropping. But if you can clearly hear what they're saying without specifically going out of your way to do so, then there's little harm in listening in order to test your skills. Tip number 2, carry a language learning notebook. With all the reading and listening you're going to be doing after following my last bit of advice, you will need to know what to do when you hear or read something in your target language that you might want to use yourself. What do you do in that situation? The answer is simple. Write it down in your language learning notebook. What notebook, you ask? Oh, just the pocket-sized notebook that you'll carry around with you constantly during your travels. A sturdy but inexpensive softcover notebook that's small enough to keep you in your pocketbook, or travel bag, along with maybe a small pen or pencil. You can find many such notebooks through a quick online search, but if you want a few recommendations, take a look down in the description box. I've left some links for you. Whatever portable notebook you choose, its purpose will be to hold all of the most useful and relevant words, phrases, expressions, and other information you encounter during your travels. As I said earlier, you should be reading and listening a lot as you travel. You certainly do not have to use your language learning notebook to write down all or even most of what you hear, but you should use it to store and safeguard any bit of language that you feel inclined to incorporate into your own language use. By writing down notes and regularly reviewing them, you will be able to gradually memorize these words and expressions and later even work them into your active speaking and writing. But none of that happens if you don't start by writing in your notebook, so remember to carry it with you, no matter where you go. Tip number 3, practice common and expected situations in advance. As you travel, you'll find that there are some situations that will come up repeatedly, time and time again. For example, you'll probably have to get used to ordering food at a restaurant, purchasing a train ticket at a ticket counter, or talking to a taxi driver so he can get you to your proper destination. Repeating scenarios like these provide a great opportunity for you to practice and hone your language skills in a very direct, targeted way. So, as you travel, take note of the scenarios you repeatedly find yourself in, or you expect that you will find yourself in multiple times. If you expect to do something a lot, it pays to practice and refine your language around that situation so you can improve quickly. For example, if you go to the same coffee shop in Rome every morning to grab an espresso and a quick snack, write down the questions the barista asks to take your order. Then, the next time you order, practice your refined version. You will find that you'll be a lot more prepared and comfortable, and your interactions will be much more authentic as a result. Tip number 4, hang out with locals. One of the best ways to learn a language while abroad is perhaps the most obvious, by spending as much time as possible with native speakers. There's quite simply no better and more authentic source of language than a person who speaks that language as his or her mother tongue. Everyone you meet is a potential treasure trove of every source of language knowledge you can imagine. Pronunciation, vocabulary, grammar, slang, culture, you name it, you can learn about it from a native speaker. Even if the person you're interacting with has no desire or ability to teach you their language, you can still learn a near infinite amount just by observing what they say, how they speak, and the limitless ways in which they use their language to express themselves. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Luca, I get it. You can learn a lot from natives, but how can I actually find native speakers to hang out while I travel? That's easier than you might think. Nowadays, there are a wide range of apps and online platforms that anyone can use to easily meet people and make new friends, even when abroad. In my opinion, the best place to start is with language learning mobile apps like HelloTalk and Tandem. These apps are community platforms where native speakers and learners can easily find each other, interact, and even meet in person. But you're not just limited to language learning apps either. Online platforms like Meetup and Eventbrite are great ways to discover groups, clubs, meetings, and other in-person events that are happening nearly anywhere in the world. You'll have more options in big cities, of course, but no matter where you're traveling, these sites are worth a look. Last but not least, you can also use dating apps as an effective way to connect with others as you travel. I'm talking about apps like Tinder, Plenty of Fish, Bumble, and Grindr, just to name a few. Most people use these apps to find romance, but if that's not what you're looking for, you'll find that there's usually an option to look for friendships rather than relationships. If the other options I've shared do not appeal to you, definitely give dating apps a try. Once you've found a native speaker to hang out with, the rest is relatively easy. Grab some coffee, go to a movie, visit a museum, or attend a local event. The sky's the limit, really. Just spend time with the person, do your best to use the language, and then also try to absorb as much language as you can from them. Doing that has helped me make huge strides in many of my best languages, so I highly recommend it. Tip number 5, hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. This last tip here is primarily about managing expectations. While we often hope that our travels and language learning experiences will go as pleasantly as possible, the reality is that things often go wrong. You might not understand someone speaking to you, or they might not understand you. You might stutter or get flustered when it comes time to speak. People might even be rude to you when you make mistakes. A lot more can go wrong than just that, but you get the idea. Not everything will go smoothly all the time. Rather than run from that fact, the best thing to do is prepare yourself for it mentally, well in advance of your trip. Things will go wrong. You will make mistakes, but you will be okay. As I always say, mistakes are an inevitable and unavoidable part of the language learning process. So the best thing to do is embrace them and see them as stepping stones on the path of growth and language mastery. Okay, those are my 5 tips for maximizing your language learning while traveling abroad. To recap, these tips are as follows. Tip number 1, cultivate your curiosity. Tip number 2, carry a language learning notebook. Tip number 3, practice common and expected situations in advance. Tip number 4, hang out with locals. And tip number 5, hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. If you do these things while traveling abroad in a country where your target language is spoken, then I can guarantee that you will learn a lot, a ton more than you ever could learn from staying at home. Okay, that's all for now. If you'd like to learn additional tips and strategies for learning a language while traveling abroad, then check the description box for a link to an article that goes even more in depth on this awesome topic. Thanks for watching, and as always, happy language learning.